what I would say that contractors need to understand is what is the risk profile of the bank? And so that comes from a couple of different aspects. Number one, how long have you been doing the work that you have? How detailed are your financial statements? That's really a big component of that. And that's step one for me to be able to say, tell me where you've been so that I can start to forecast where we're going.
Hey guys, it's Karalynn and welcome back to the podcast. Today on Construction Legal Made Easy, I'm joined by Hazem Ahmed, co-founder and president of Integrity Bank. Hazem is passionate about empowering small and mid-sized businesses, strengthening communities through responsible banking, and building meaningful relationships as the true measure of wealth. We're diving into what contractors need to know about banking, access to capital, and how to build a strong financial relationship that actually support your growth instead of holding you back. Good morning. How are you doing? Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. All right, so before we dive in, tell us about you and how you got to where you are now.
What makes us unique, there's so many banks out there, is the approachability that you have. You walk into our lobby, you see the chairman, you see the CEO of the bank, you can walk into their office and say, here's my project. And what do you think? And you should walk out of there with a very clear understanding of what that bank is going to do. So not a very layered approach. If it doesn't make sense, we'll tell you right off the bat about what we'd like to see amended for it to be a bankable deal. And if it does, we start talking about timeline and what documents are required. So that clear kind of relationship in banking, unfortunately, is becoming an anomaly. And there's a lot of Wizard of the Oz kind of curtain, and we write to get rid of the curtain and just talk to people like their time is important, which it is. So that's us. We're one location, established here in Houston, and raised the capital to start this bank, which is not an easy task. There's only seven banks opened up in 2024, and that's about the average a year. So we're proud to be one of those.
That's awesome. So what do most contractors misunderstand about their relationship with their bank?
I think one of the things I'd tell any contractor or small business owner is to understand the risk profile of a bank. Banks don't want to take a lot of risk because they don't make a lot of reward. And so there's a lot of different ways to say that I don't want to take a lot of risk. Sitting still and saying I don't want to make a loan isn't how you avoid risk. Then your bank is out of business. So we have to make loans. We want to make loans. That's a primary component of what we do. We don't sell credit cards. We don't do wealth management. So really, a bank like ours, a small community bank, is very simple. You have deposits and you have loans. So what I would say that contractors need to understand is what is the risk profile of the bank? And so that comes from a couple of different aspects. Number one, how long have you been doing the work that you have? How detailed are your financial statements? That's really a big component of that. We see a lot of clients who are very talented at what they do. They do wonderful work. They price their work well. They have great following, but they don't have the right financial statements. And that's step one for me to be able to say, tell me where you've been so that I can start to forecast where we're going. I've met some folks over my years who say, I don't want to prepare financial statements when I'm not doing incredibly well. That's not going to tell the story. But there's so much minutia in that financial statement. What happened to your revenues? What happened to your margins? Did you have bad debt expense? If so, how did you continue or stop doing business with those folks? Critical aspects. So what I would say is from day one, if you don't have a real clear understanding of what your operations look like on a financial statement basis, that would be the first thing I would encourage somebody to fix, primarily so that they can start talking about risk in an equal setting from the bank.
And that kind of goes to my next question is what makes a contractor bankable? What should a contractor have to be accepted by a bank?
The biggest thing is, I've seen a lot of contractors who have a lot of work, and even high revenues, but that doesn't necessarily dovetail into the creation of cash. So if I had to pick one, I'd say really understanding that cash cycle. What's from when you go and sign a contract until when you get that last retainage check, what do all the ups, peaks, and the valleys look like? When did you have to pay your sub versus when you collected that first draw? So a to me, a very bankable contractor is somebody who has a real clear understanding and purposeful in setting up, hey, this is when I bill, this is why I bill this amount, and this is when I'm going to need the bank to support the gap. If it's, hey, I've got a lot of clients and I'm doing 100 roofs this week, and I bill folks and it's net 30, but some people pay me, some people don't. All that's really going to lead to most likely is somebody walking into the bank saying, hey, I told you I needed a $250,000 line of credit. It's fully funded. I was wrong. I need a $750,000 line of credit. And that's hard to walk into committee and say, remember the guy we talked about 3 weeks ago that we approved? We need to triple that. Otherwise, they're in a conundrum. We don't want to be that reactive. So hopefully really understanding when I take that job, when am I going to get paid? Each and every step is.
So then on that question, what are some of the big red flags that would say a bank not lend money or give a line of credit?
Yeah, Karalynn, I touched on it just a second ago, and I would say this. Bad debt expense is huge, right? Because it's really the culmination of, you've had your effort, you expected that check to come in, and you have obligations to other parties that you have to pay. And so it's not that, hey, I didn't make any money. It's, hey, I lost a lot of money on this deal. So to me, it maybe kind of goes back a little bit to the previous question, knowing who you're doing business with. And if I'm meeting somebody for the first time and they say, hey, look, I've worked for this company, let's say a school district as an example, and I have cleaned their gyms for 10 years. And they always pay me on time. And here's the receipt of that revenue. That's very easy to rely on. I just moved to Houston and I'm going to fix 10 roofs. And I think I've got, a good source. And here are the contracts that I've sent. That gets to be difficult because I don't know if you got those, in a way where you did your due diligence to make sure that you're getting paid. And ultimately, that contractor getting paid is how the bank is going to get paid. There is no other source of payment typically. So I think that's a really big component is understanding the confidence that contractor has in the relationship.
Well, and I think that's where construction and legal comes in too, right? So any good contractor will have a collection strategy because it's not a matter of time of when he doesn't get it, it's going to happen.
Yes.
And it's going to be, how big is the job is he not going to get paid on? And is he prepared for it? Right. So, and there's great remedies that contractors have.
There are. Yeah. I mean, they are really in a very advantageous position. Frankly, you see finance buy signs all over the place in the industry. And I think from afar, somebody could say, hey, bankers do that for marketing purposes. And that's an element of it. You also do it to identify to those subs that are on the property, hey, look, we have a vested interest in this. And if you are not getting paid, we want to know because we'd hate that to be discovered when you're closing the sale of that townhome or whatever the case may be. So, and there's good players and there's bad players. Unfortunately, from a contractor's perspective, I feel terrible that they get renegotiated through a project often. And unfortunately, it happens. That's again another reason why dealing with somebody that you've dealt with on an extended period of time that is going to pay on time. And I talk a lot about this in our industry, and I think, frankly, in society, we need to focus more on it, which is mutual success. We spend so much time figuring out how I make my pile bigger or how that person makes their pile bigger. There's really an overlap that exists that you win and I win. And if contractors have the capability of expressing that to the right clients of theirs and knowing that it wasn't just talk from their client's perspective, but what they adopt, I think that'd be a wise move. We all want more revenues, but frankly, less revenue that are quality is better than dealing with some of the headaches. Nobody wants to be in a courtroom and nobody wants to send a bunch of attorney letters, but it has to happen. And unfortunately, there are remedies like I mentioned that are advantageous to a contractor, more maybe than a lot of other fields.
Well, and I've done construction collections for the last 20 years, and it is very rare, I will tell you, that a bank cares, especially in Texas, because they have first lien priority. So and don't be wrong, to their lender who's going to have to go to permanent financing, it matters.
Yes. Do you mean the bank doesn't care if they're sitting there for a long-term indebtedness? Is that correct?
No, the bank is unconcerned generally with lien claimants.
Yeah.
And it depends on the bank, right? Like the smaller banks, may care, but like Wells Fargo, the bigger
No.
bank, they don't care.
Don't get me on that. I don't believe Wells Fargo really cares about anything. And I'll say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but you're 100% right. For us, why I care is that guy said he's going to close on the sale of that townhome on September 1st. And if there's some kind of unsettled lien components to that close, that can be, and frankly, it's expensive, right? The guy had this much interest expense associated. If it's just a relationship between us and the contractor, yeah, this much interest expense budgeted. And if it goes 30 days, 45 days, which is a very quick resolution in any world, then it still costs quite a bit of money. I'll tell you another aspect where we do care, or at least in my experience, is when work has started prior to our lien being in place. So there's plenty of times where I've seen a great project. Let's say a very strong guy comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm going to build a gas station on this corner." Wonderful. I'm going to put so much. How much money do you want down, Hazem? I want 20% or 25% or whatever the case may be. And he says, "No, I just want you to finance 50% of it." And then he starts digging. He starts putting a pump. My title company is going to come to me and say, "Hey, look, you got to go tell that client he has to freeze for 90 days in order for us to make sure there are no M&M liens that supersede the bank's position." I wish more people knew that, both on the contractor side and on the investor side, because it's a very hard conversation for us to say, yes, 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 yes. Now stop. That momentum killer. Again, can be expensive and can impact some of the relationships that they have with their subs. And
yeah, absolutely. If they're going to do the funding, they need to do it first.
100%. Yes.
And because me as an attorney, what I would look at is there's this theory called relation back. And in my 20 years, I've gotten like 3 or 4 banks on it. And the theory is mechanics lien relates back to the first work on the job. So if that first work is that dirt crew out there, which was out there before the deed of trust was filed, your note, we relate back to then, even though we're filed later. And when we foreclose, we could wipe you out.
Yeah.
Now, that's the theory, right?
Right.
Try explaining that to a judge or a jury. Like yes. Nobody gets it. They don't. It's like, okay, let me draw you a timeline and try to put it in place. But that is the theory, and that's why banks won't do that. I mean, it puts them at huge risk.
Right, and even if it's not going to happen, like you said, and even if the judge is not going to support that line of thinking, I assure you, there's a lender inside of a boardroom who represented that relationship and said, "Hey, look, we're smooth sailing for the next 10 miles, and when those choppy waters come." Whether it's the risk element of or the credit team, somebody says, "Hey, look, this is not going the way that we intended it to go." And again, it goes back to the first point that we talked about. And this is not to say poor us. It is our nature of our industry is that the rewards should be low and the risk should be relatively low. I don't charge people 12% or 20% because the risk that we're taking shouldn't require us to have that kind of return. So when that risk component changes in elements that we did not expect or that were not part of the deal originally, it can fracture or even maybe just hinder a little bit of the relationship between the bank when you're saying, "Hey, now we're focusing on things we didn't want to have."
Yeah, exactly. And nobody and the way the liens are set up, the liens are great remedies, and there should be notices that are sent that tee everybody off. But the way it's set up is that an owner or a contractor could have to pay twice if they're not on top of everybody who's on the job.
Yeah, and the records associated with it and who got paid and did they actually receive those funds is a responsibility. And it goes back to a lot of things I think in business, which is who are you doing business with? How much do you, and I always use these 3 elements, like, trust, and respect. In this component, trust is obviously a big part, but the like and respect is not small. I mean, there's an element of, again, mutual success and a desire for me to say, "Hey, look, what's good for us both is what's good for the long term here so that we can turn this one project into the next."
Absolutely.
Not getting paid on a job you already completed? Well, that's where we come in. At the Karalynn Law Firm, our lien and collection department helps you get paid fast and the right way. You did the work, you deserve to get paid. We help you take the right legal steps by filing liens and collecting the money that's owed. Contact us at 713-715-7334, or you can visit our website at www.thekrominslawfirm.com.
And then under the note, I've dealt with several small businesses that were having things built by contractors and had the bank involved. And I think they rely to their detriment that the bank is going to make sure everything is okay. And here's the thing, to an extent you are, but at the end of the day, it's their project. If they sign off on the pay draws and everybody gets paid, even though the work wasn't done, that's on them.
100%. We send inspectors, and frankly, we send inspectors to make sure that the foundation that was poured is what was specified in the appraisal, as an example. But if the lumber that's being used is not to the exact quality or spec that was promised and paid for, that's typically not going to get caught up in the inspection of a financial institution. And rightly so, right? I don't think a lot of my clients would enjoy me saying, I don't love the lumber in the bedroom, in the third bedroom in the back of the house. That's not where our area of expertise is. And I know a little bit about a lot, but I don't know a lot about a lot. And so my point is, staying in communication with the bank, understanding where their hot buttons are is a part of the process, but that does not ensure a perfect project. Ultimately, let's say whether it's a townhome construction deal, that's a pretty simple and very frequent project that we see around town and have for a really long time. We're probably sending 5 inspections out, maybe 7 throughout the term of the project. And that's all the way from the form foundation, from the form survey, all the way to, a turnkey, had the project's finished. And so there's a lot that gets covered up between draw 3 and 4, or 5 and 7, or whatever the case may be. And so they absolutely should rely on the bank to say, here's what I expect the communication to be in the oversight, but it is not something that if the bank is good, then the project is good. We've seen plenty of finished projects that the bank funded all the way through that then has a lawsuit or a leak issue or a this or a that or a warranty claim. And that's not because this is not just to say that our responsibility is satisfied, but I don't think that those are things that the bank could have accomplished.
I agree. And I don't think it's your job to either, right? I think like some people that have never built before have a false sense of security in the inspection process. Because they still, I don't care what you're building or who you're building it with, you need to be out there most of the time.
1,000%. Yeah. Who's out there and what are they doing and how hard are they working and what are you paying for? I mean, these are hundreds of thousands of dollars of expenses sometimes. And if you think, I bought a car recently, I probably looked at it 8 times before I bought it, And it's a brand new car and it's under warranty and it's a Chevy. It's not like, you're buying something that hasn't been made before and doesn't have a quality. But that's very true when you look at some of these projects. Hey, look, nobody's promised you anything. And if you haven't done the business and you're not looking hard, I think you might be putting yourself, at least you're rolling dice. Hopefully it goes well. But if it doesn't go well, it's not going to be an inexpensive mistake.
I agree. And it's not only the banks too that unjustifiably rely on the city inspectors.
Yes.
Who have no liability if they get it wrong.
100%. Well, sometimes it's very difficult to get that next, that sign off on that last inspection that you feel like if it was this hard, they must be really, really, really caring. If it took us this long to get permitting, then these must be perfect plans.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit of sense of false hope. Experience is valuable in anything that we do. And that's an example of it.
Yeah. So when should a contractor start building a relationship with a bank?
I believe this across the board. If I were a small, medium-sized business owner, a real estate investor, or a contractor, it doesn't make a difference to those. And I could tell you, hey, this is the way that you're going to woo your bank. I would start off with being very purposeful about what bank you're establishing a relationship with. And we joked a second ago about some of these larger institutions. But take a moment and really think about, when you walk into one of those banks, I get that you may know the lobby services manager, if they have one anymore. Many of them do not have those. But if I keep my deposits at this institution for X period of time, how valuable is that to the institution? And how much detail will they extract from it in order to give me the confidence, to give them the confidence that they're going to extend credit? So to answer your question a little bit more directly, if I was a contractor, I would not start off my relationship with, I have a need. It's just like any other relationship. You walk up to somebody and say, hey, can you give me blah, 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 blah. It's why you as opposed to somebody else? And you know what, I'm busy or whatever the case may be. Now, if a family member comes to us with that exact same request, or a friend or a neighbor or somebody that we have a historic relationship with, value that historic relationship with, it's very difficult just to say to somebody, I'm not interested, right? And the right banker would not say that. So I would propose this. There's plenty of small community banks. We're not the only one in this city. Dealing with somebody, and there's a combination of you should be with the right bank and you should be with the right bank. I think sometimes people do one of those two, and it won't get you all the way home. But if you're with the right bank and right banker, I'd establish a depository relationship with them, and I'd let it stay. And I would walk into the lender's office from time to time and say, hey, I just want to let you know I got this project. I don't need funding. I'm going through a different source, but it looks like this. If this goes well, I'm going to do 2 next year. That familiarity and orientation is beneficial because my role or any other lender here at this bank or bank similar to ours is going to walk into a committee setting on your behalf and say, I want to lend this individual or this organization this much money, and here's why I'm confident in doing it. If they don't have that detail, if they don't have that history, it makes it very difficult. So start a depository relationship, start communication, start providing financials before you have a need, and you'll be very surprised. It doesn't mean that that company has to have achieved a tremendous amount. You'll be very surprised how warm that conversation is, as opposed to, my name is Hazem, and can I get $1 million from you next week?
Yeah, and I think sometimes contractors or even small business owners that are just starting out aren't intentional about where they open their account.
Yes.
Realize that that's the start of the relationship, right? Like some big banks not even notice that you opened an account.
I don't mean to be hokey, Karalynn, but I give this analogy often. If we're on a road trip, I don't care if it's going to Austin or going to Denver or anywhere. There's a lot of us who see a McDonald's sign and say, okay, we're going to exit 3 exits. You drive through and you get a number 1 or whatever the case may be. There's another person who's looking up Yelp and figuring out what's the best cafe or what's the best mom and pop in that town. And you never, in my experience, drive out of that McDonald's saying, that was awesome. I'm so happy we stopped here. But you're probably at a 50+% of doing that at a small cafeteria or a mom and pop restaurant. And I think that analogy in banking really should exist. Look, if you own stock in B of A or Wells or Chase or any of those institutions, excellent. They're great organizations for a lot of things. I have a Bank of America credit card in my pocket right now. There's other things that they are really good at providing. But when it comes to building a relationship, a big box bank is not, in my opinion, the place to go. And that's why we started this bank, and that's why I've always been in this sector.
Yeah, because even if you get a good banker that you like, then he switches banks. And then what do you do?
Well, that's why I say, you really like Rachel, the office manager at the big box bank. She's going to do one of 2 things. She's going to do really well and they're going to promote her, or she's going to do really well and get an offer at another institution, or she's not, and she's not going to have the authority to be able to do anything bigger than what she did. If somebody giving you immediate credit is not on a check or a deposit, that's not indicative of all you need from a bank. It's great that day, and that's a problem if you don't get immediate credit on that check, as an example, but there's more to it than that.
So how can contractors use financing strategically to grow without getting over leveraged?
Again, I think the cash cycle is difficult. One of the things I really pay a lot of attention to when I'm meeting up with a contractor, and construction is the easiest, one to look at, but it probably is applicable in many elements, is, are you robbing Peter to pay Paul? If you should have the capability of saying, I have 5 projects or 50 projects, it doesn't make a difference. Here's my cost associated with it, and here's my anticipated revenue. There are going to be times you don't make the money that you thought you were going to make. There are going to be times where you lose money. But stealing that profitability or that funding, stealing is not the right word, borrowing or letting those overlap is really dangerous.
And illegal.
And illegal. Thank you. I'll leave the legality to you. Dangerous from a credit standpoint, from our side. Sometimes different banks fund different projects. Those are not necessarily monogamous relationships. And so I don't want to know, and it's probably the biggest deal killer, is you took money out of my proceeds. You elevated my risk because you had a loss over there. Now, if you come to me alternatively, best case scenario is you have a little rainy day fund. Hey, look, when a project goes bad, I'm going to tap this stream of funds. But if you don't, I'd love for somebody to say, hey, Hazem, you have nothing to do with this project, but I'm in over my head, and this is what this looks like. what are my alternatives? We are extending a small unsecured line of credit so that you could remedy that problem, and so that doesn't get to be something that hinders the whole the whole pool of projects that you're working on, or the whole basket of apples is kind of the analogy I was looking for. That's wise to do, because that confidence and that idea that, hey, look, now I'm responsible for all of your projects, and I don't know how all of them were underwritten, is not a good move from a contractor standpoint when it comes to the quality of the relationship.
Correct. And I think, contractors don't understand the severity, especially so. I mean, it's called trust funds. As a contractor, once you receive funds for a job, the first thing you got to do is pay all the people that you owe on that job, whether that's subcontractors, material suppliers, whatever. After you do that, You're good. But if you divert those funds to do something else, then that's in violation. Not only, it can open you up to personal liability, right? And so that's a huge no-no. And then on the residential side, especially in Texas, any residential project over 25K is supposed to have its own bank account so that you can easily track the funds going in and out. Now, most contractors don't, because it's a pain in the ass, but as long as you can, and as long as you can trace it where all the funds went, you're okay, but it makes it easier if you do have its own bank account. But I think a lot of the times they kind of take that for granted. And because if you can cover it, it's fine. Nobody ever knows. But the one time you can't, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, and when we discover, frankly, that it's an issue is when it's a big issue, right? It's not the first time that, oh my gosh, I need to cover this $5,000 check, or how am I going to pay my cement guy this morning? Typically, contractors can find their way around it. But when it's, hey, look, property's not selling, I don't have enough to finish the project. Those are times where the bank is quickly lose confidence that this is being operated the way that it should be operated. Interesting about that bank account, I didn't know that. I'll do a little bit more digging about that, because
and it doesn't really come up, but like if they get sued for something else, it will.
We are very adamant's not the right word, but we encourage our clients to, especially in some of the larger projects, somebody's building 6+ townhome projects, we'd like that to be a single asset entity for insurance purposes and for accounting purposes as well. So,
and that bank account rules only applies when you're hired by the homeowner. It's not if a developer building a townhomes or anything, but if like a homeowner hires you to build a house or something over 25K, you're supposed to do that. So
what's under $25,000 these days?
Yeah, really nothing.
Maybe can you pressure wash for less than that these days? Maybe.
You only do the driveway.
Yeah, we got to stop here.
All right. So if a contractor is doing small jobs and getting ready to do a bigger job, how can they prepare for that financially?
Show me the success of all the smaller jobs that you did. All of those. When you show me your 2024 financials, that's all going to be in one bucket. But I love for somebody to sit down, and these are the types of conversations that I think a good banker is going to enjoy. Let me tell you where I started. I made $3,000 on this one. This project went this way. These are great people and how I met them. So I want to be able to envision that you walk before you're going to start sprinting. But if you show me the many, many, many miles that you walk, I'm confident that we are about clients taking the next step. That's how they grow. That's how we grow. We didn't say, hey, look, we want to finance your plateau approach. We want to finance your growth. And that means that you're going to do bigger things and bigger projects. And if you have never done something and you're going to do something tremendously big, is my advice to somebody is partner yourself with people who can give you the advice who's been there. There's nothing wrong with a contractor saying, this is a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, and so me and this partner are going to work on this together. He's done this 10 times. I've seen that a lot. If you look at the gas station business, how many small other family members, a cousin, a nephew, or whatever the case may be, was a 10% partner. Now he's a 25% partner, did that twice, and now he's building his own portfolio. So that similar type of approach of you don't have to hit a grand slam your first at bat. Just make contact, and after that, let's get on base and kind of having that progressive nature. Again, it needs a bank that's going to remember what you've done. There's a lot of guys that say, who are you again? And tell me the last 4 of your social security number. They're asking you that. I don't care what news you're telling them and how much detail you have. It's going to fall on deaf ears.
Yeah. So as a company grows in construction, what is one mistake that contractors make when they try to scale?
I think doing it too fast. and not recognizing that. Look, we've been very fortunate to be in a market like Houston. I'm so proud of what the city has done economically during my professional life. It's awesome. I don't know that it's the very best in the country, but I think it's certainly in that bucket. And so, and it's not just, frankly, how much we've built. You look at Houston I'm born in Galveston. I've lived here my whole life. Houston looks significantly different decade by decade. I used to think that the Beltway 8 was really far out and you couldn't break down there in the middle of the night or else nobody's going to find you until tomorrow morning. And now you look at 99 and, people say Fulshire is kind of close now. But I think gauging that opportunity and that growth is really critical, not moving too fast and making sure that your relationship with your accountant, I've seen people who have a big tax obligation that they didn't forecast be the problem that sunk their ship, or some kind of a legal issue that may or may not even have any value to it, but that might. So surrounding yourself with the right attorney, the right accountant, the right banker, building that war chest up before you pull the trigger, I think, on that next big project is critical. At the very least, if they're the right people and you do hit a road bump, they're going to help you navigate.
Exactly. And that's the thing about, I'm sure bankers are the same way, and lawyers is like, they usually come to you when it's like they're in dire need. And just like, if you had come to me before, we could have been way better off.
I don't love this because I think it kind of feeds into the perspective of what bankers are. And this is the opposite of what I hope Integrity Bank ever is. But if you have an emergency, that's not my job, because frankly, again, goes back to risk reward. But another element of it is, if you have an emergency today, you're higher likelihood to have an emergency tomorrow, next week, and next month.
Yeah.
So trying to avoid the, oh my gosh, I need to meet with you tomorrow morning, or else I'm going to have to file bankruptcy is not a call anybody wants to receive.
No. All right. What's one thing every contractor should ask their banker, but they usually don't?
How long have you been with the bank? And what's your authority level? I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes people feel like that is maybe you're not being kind, or you're not being considerate or respectful of the person. Talk to me about how a deal gets done. Tell me about deals that you thought could get done that didn't get done, and why. I mean, you're interviewing this bank. I think so many people focus on, hey, if I get this loan, what's my interest rate? And that's fine, but maybe as a part of your projection, or if you're doing that in order to have your cash flow model kind of be representative of what the project looks like. But I think really knowing the institution is important. And on top of that, I think really knowing the banker and what their authority level is. If somebody's been, and again, I'm not speaking poorly upon anybody, I hope, but if somebody's been with 5 banks in 7 years, that should tell you something, or whatever the case is. And we have so much information out there. You can hop on LinkedIn, you can ask that banker for a reference. Hey, who else are you doing business with that's like me that I could talk to? There's nothing wrong with that. If you're going to put that much of your livelihood in their court, take your time to do the due diligence, and don't take the banker who's going to say yes as an indication that that's the right banker for you. And another thing in what you should extract out of that to your audience is, there are banks, and I've seen plenty of clients who say, man, I got yes all the way until I got to $500,000. And when I ask them for $501,000, it's like I am, an unacceptable risk. I'm not sure why that is. Sometimes that's, hey, look, at that level, it's under individual authority, or it's him and their boss.
Gotcha.
But at the next level, I've got to go to loan committee, and loan committee is going to be a lot harder. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, and I actually would advise any small, medium-sized business owner to understand, how is that decision being made?
Gotcha. So is there anything else out there about banking and contracting that I didn't ask that you would like to add?
Just in general, on the banking side, there's a tremendous amount of consolidation that's happening, especially here in the Houston market. And so I wouldn't put your eggs in one basket. There's plenty of banks around town from different times, and not picking any particular ones out. We all go through our own balance sheet management. And so I've seen some institutions say, we're not in the lending game right now. We don't want to make construction loans. We're not going to do any commercial real estate. And that's a result of what their balance sheet looks like today. and or in this case, especially, who owns you and what are they chasing? And there's some institutions who say, hey, we don't want to be in the construction game. And if you have historically been with a bank that's been acquired, I think it's a great time to reorient yourself and ask your officer, do you intend to stay with them? What's that look like? What's your anticipation of what's going to change? Those are all questions I think that are really reasonable to ask. And I think that it really would position a contractor to not just know what to expect from that existing relationship, but also start to be a guide towards, hey, should I go spread my opportunities around to another institution or two? I think it's wise not to have all your eggs in one basket in any part of life, but especially.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. If anybody wanted to know more about Integrity Bank, where would they go?
ITX.bank is our website. We're located at I-10 in Bingle. Look us up, come on in. You'll walk into a lobby full of bankers and decision makers, and hopefully individuals that can be beneficial to the success of your office.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're awesome. Appreciate the time.